So the claim I'll be refuting today is Minna's claim, which is attempts to colonize outer space will ultimately lead to an international and interplanetary conflict and significant diplomatic complications. Her three claims are: number one, it is human nature to go to war over vital resources. 2, the Paris issue addressed by the UN needs to be stricter to prevent potential abuse should colonization occur. Paris refers to the prevention of an arms race in outer space. 3 is, despite how much we have done to develop the necessary technology, we don't have the necessary grounds to do so peacefully. And so, for the first claim, it is human nature to go to war over vital resources. The evidence that she provides is a bit sketchy. By sketchy, I mean that, for example, the first one, the historical evidence that she gives is that the British colonization of India for resources and the conflict between Mideast nations for water. And through that, she wants to say that it is human nature, through those 2 examples out of hundreds of years of history throughout the whole entire world, that it's human nature to go to war over vital resources. Based on that, I don't think that basing the future on the past is in itself accurate, especially just 2 examples of it. The second piece of evidence she has is that Mars is precious and useful in the sense that it is rich in carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen. However, all of those elements are found on Earth as well as the entire universe, and hydrogen is also according to Fred Sanase from Frostburg University, he actually says hydrogen is more plentiful than any other element, making up about 3/4 the mass of the universe. Helium is second, making up almost the remaining 25%, and oxygen is third. Also, the value of the elements do not lay in them separately, but then it matters because of the structures and bonds that form other things, such as paper and oil are 2 different objects, but both are made of carbon and hydrogen. But the difference are just the organic structures that it applies. The second claim is that the Paris issue needs to be addressed by the UN to be stricter to prevent potential abuse. However, the first point of evidence she gives is that we need to prevent space from being weaponized. The weapons we have right now are not exactly suitable for space, being that it obeys the laws of gravity on Earth and not space. I found that you can fire guns in space, but there will be a consequence, being that, according to Natalie Wolchover from Life Science, she says that Newton's 3rd law dictates that the force exerted on the bullet will impart an equal and opposite force on the gun, and because you're holding the gun, it'll be you. With very few intergalactic atoms against which to brace yourself, you'll start moving backwards. If the bullet leaves the gun barrel at 1,000 meters per second, you, because you're much more massive than it is, will head the other way at only a few centimeters per second. But that's with a rifle gun, a small gun in your hand, with an astronaut. Now compare that to an actual large machine that they would bring into outer space, and if they had to bring that into outer space, how much would that actually cost at that point too? And so then it also says that using the space shuttle to get a pound of something to the space station would be approximately $10,000. So even getting those machines all up into space for combat, for these vital resources, would be way more excessive. We'd be losing way more than we gain, basically, especially financially wise. Her second piece of evidence was that treaties and agreements can be broken, and this contradicts the claim itself. Her claim for that evidence was that the Paris issue needed to be addressed by the UN and needs to be stricter to prevent potential abuse. She gave the example by Igar Ashur-Bailey through Asgardia, which was a government that he claimed to want to promote in outer space so that he could go between government regulations. However, she just said that treaties and agreements can be broken, so I don't see the need of making any of the treaties any stricter. And even if it were stricter, there would be plenty of cases out there where illegal happenings would be happening still nonetheless, as people, no matter what, would still take risks to be able to get what they want. An example for that would be that America still has slavery despite it being illegal and having crude consequences if discovered. Polaris, which is an organization that stands for freedom of every individual, shares that since 2007, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline operated by Polaris has received reports of 14,588 sex trafficking cases inside the United States. And in a 2014 report, the Urban Institute estimated that the underground sex economy ranged from $39.9 million in Denver, Colorado to $290 million in Atlanta, Georgia. The third claim she makes is that despite that we may have technology to travel into space, we are not politically or psychologically prepared to travel into space. The thing is, I feel that this is actually a bit irrelevant and her evidence is unreliable, being that her evidence, she mainly had questions in her evidence such as what might we do in the event life is sustainable in an interplanetary scope, who would own outer space, and what should we do in the event intelligent life presents itself. Also, there is no way to be politically or psychologically sure of something that you've never actually done before, so there is pretty much her evidence is irrelevant and is very unreliable for this case. In conclusion, I would like to say that there will not be as much interplanetary conflict or significant diplomatic complications that she actually thinks there will be. Thank you.
All the structural stuff is good. The first point, I thought that there was good responses to the evidence that's being used, to the examples that the advocate cited. The data about the resource availability, I think, does need a source citation. Well, you did have one source citation on it, so that was okay. The information about the combinations, and you started talking about paper and oil, and I have no idea what that argument was about, what it pertains to. So it wasn't clear to me what the advocate had said on this issue that prompted your response. It wasn't clear what your response meant to that particular point. The clearer part was that we have all these resources available to us already, so the likelihood that we're going to be fighting over those sorts of things is, I guess, minimized to some degree. I'm not saying that your argument wasn't relevant. I'm just saying I couldn't see how it was relevant, and it needed to be explained a little bit better. All right, the Paros issue, I thought you explained reasonably well. That there's complications of weaponizing space, that the cost would be exceptionally high. I also think that there probably needs to be an argument that suggests that there's not really that much motive for worrying about it. I don't know that it's likely. The actors that are most likely to be doing that would be, I guess, the Chinese and the Russians in this particular situation, and there might be a discussion about what their resources are like and whether or not they could afford to do those sorts of things. But when you talked about the cost issue, I thought that was fine. And then there's the technological issue about gravity and the way it works. I thought that was interesting. I got the image of somebody shooting guns. I'm not exactly sure that that's the kind of weaponization that they're talking about. But you know what? The advocate didn't clarify that, so maybe that should be the final argument on that particular point. The third argument, the comparison to slavery was a little bit weird. I guess the idea here is that we can't trust any laws, so why are we worrying about this? Somebody's going to cheat, somebody's going to do bad things, and the idea that that's any different, that these agreements in space would be any different than any other agreement. I kind of understand the point that you're making there, although I thought it was a strange analogy to be drawing in this particular case. It didn't seem like it was going to get you that much, and it really felt a little bit like you were off on a tangent on that particular point. Although you did have some nice evidence to support your position there, so that I thought was worthy. All right. Thank you. Is there anybody else who's ready to speak tonight?